Well, good evening and welcome to From the Wheelhouse. I'm covering for Captain Mark, our main host. He is down at the Miami Boat Show doing his thing. So he asked me to fill in. I'm Captain Jim Mescall, and I invited the amazing Wisconsin Tiff here to be my guest. She's got a variety of experiences on the water. And we're both from Wisconsin people, so a lot to talk about there. And she spent some time in Tennessee, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Going to talk about some interest she has about getting a boat for herself, which she's looking for. And then talk a little bit about her family had some experience on, which I really don't quite understand myself, but it's diving on inland rivers.
In the rivers.
Diving,
shell diving.
And they didn't use scuba tanks. They had a compressor up on like a John boat, and it was like an octopus extension thing where they would breathe through that.
It was a hose that would go from a compressor
Wow.
To a regulator, and then it would be hooked on to the weight belt, and then that's how you would breathe with that.
So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the Bahamas. You know, you guys may have noticed that recently the government has put out a, travel advisory about going to the Bahamas. There's been crime issues. There's been several shark attacks recently for some unknown reason. There's been boat sinkings of tour boats off of major cruise ships, and so if you're going to go down there, you got to be pretty careful. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the spots where Wisconsin Tiff, she likes to travel, like to Aruba and Costa Rica, and she's taken some of these tour boat rides. So we're going to talk about that. Now we're going to talk about tours up in Wisconsin, like you've heard of the Wisconsin Dells and the Ducks. Those they can travel on land or they can go on the water. They were used by the military a lot in World War II. And then I'm going to say hello to my friends over there at Truck 1, Engine 1, and Ambulance 41. They're a group of good firemen and firewomen. My cousin, he just became a Chicago fireman about 4 months ago, and I stopped over there and met his captain, who happens to be a captain like me, and some of the guys. So they're all watching it at the firehouse. So hello to Truck 1 and Engine 1 and Ambulance 41 and Colleen and Captain Chris and Frank. So let's start out with living on the water. I lived on the water. I had a home up there in Fort Atkinson from, really dating myself, 1977 to 1989. Loved every minute of it. I was on a large inland lake called Lake Quashqan. It wasn't very deep, but it was fed by the Red Rock River. And I still go back there. I miss it dearly. I mean, the place hasn't changed since... It's like stuck in time. I call it Mayberry. It's, if you watch the Andy Griffith Show, everyone's friendly. You know, everyone abides by the rules. Everything's peaceful. You don't have to lock your door. I mean, it's virtually unheard of, and it's only like 110 miles from Chicago. A totally different world, like Nirvana. So when I had my house, it was up on a bluff, and 20 feet above the lake, so I got really panoramic, great views. And I lived on the eastern shore, so I would see all the sunsets. But I go back there today, nothing's changed. And I still enjoy it as much as I did back in 77. So now, what do you like about living near the water?
It's peaceful. I love waking up and seeing the water every day. I've been living by water my entire life, so I just enjoy the view more than anything.
Now, did you have a hard time finding a place on the water? Because they're usually hard to get. I was lucky. when I got mine back in '77, I only paid $24,000 for it. Today, that same place is worth $400,000, $500,000. That's how much it appreciated, because people love lake frontage, and it's hard to get. So how did you get yours? You're like more like in
A lake.
but
Yeah.
a house or a?
A house.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yes. It was kind of a last minute thing that I saw that was available. And I wasn't planning. I moved away and then I moved back after I saw that this place was available. So I had to take it while I could.
Mm-hmm.
And usually I haven't had any bad luck trying to find a place on the water. If I find one, then I'll either rent, or I've lived in several different houses in Tennessee along the river and the lakes. I moved a lot growing up, so.
Is there, like for me, I've never really been able to find anything that tops this place. That's why I keep going back. Even though I live in, the northwest suburbs of Chicago, I still go back up to Wisconsin, that area. And it's a small little town. It's like 8,000 people. And people know how to talk to each other, and they're peaceful. And it's like hitting the reset button. I live around all the stress of the city, and you go up there, and it's like the stress just leaves you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you travel quite a bit. I mean, do you find going into bigger cities, and all that, things like that, do you feel the stress?
No, I adapt well to traveling. I'm used to being in the city and the country, so I adapt pretty well. But I do travel a lot when it comes to places that are exotic and the water and
Aruba,
Yes.
Costa Rica. Do you want to talk a little bit? I've never been to Aruba. I had been to Costa Rica. Amazing place. Costa Rica, on one side you got the Atlantic, the other side you got the Pacific, and I think you can drive across the country in like 8 hours, and you'd be from one ocean to the other. There's a lot of tropics down there and all that. The people are very friendly. What do you like about Costa Rica?
Costa Rica, I was only there once, and that was back in October, I believe, or September, and it was nice. It's very big. There was a lot of jungle, and we went on a tour boat. I got to experience the bioluminescence. I believe that's how you pronounce it. It's where you can see it in the night, where you're in the water and you move your hand and you can see it.
A friend of mine, I shouldn't say a friend, it was Captain Jim Lovell, who was one of the astronauts. And when they were with Apollo 13, that was the one that, they had the mishap and trying to get him back. And they almost lost him in space. And they were asking him about one of the most dangerous things for a Navy carrier pilot is to do their first night landing on the deck of a moving carrier. Okay, even though they're lit, it's like landing a jet plane on a postage stamp. And the comment that he made was that the props stirred up exactly what you talked about, that luminescence, and that it was just like him following a ramp right to the deck of the thing. So I know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So is that really lights up? I never did that.
Yeah.
Okay, now Aruba, what I know about Aruba is there's a lot of gambling down there and all that kind of stuff. I mean, what's your attraction to Aruba?
I've been there a dozen times, and I love it so much. The water is beautiful. It's amazing. I go on boats on there all the time. I make friends there too, so I have connections to people who have boats as well.
I saw that one picture you sent me where it looked like it was, what's that show on TV, Survivor, where everyone's in the jungle and they're trying to, was that in Costa Rica? It was a group of people you were with?
That might have been Costa Rica.
Yeah. And, but, well, isn't there a big foreign influence in Aruba? You know, like Europeans down there?
I'm not 100% sure. Every time I go there, I'm usually hanging out by myself, or I go to the tiki bar, and then I'll go on the boat with a friend, a local that lives there. And I know there's a lot of people from the Netherlands.
The Netherlands, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, yeah, I don't know if that was a colony or what it was, but it's, I know a lot of people like it, and, but I've never been there. It's on my bucket list of things to do. So, let's see. So we were chatting. We've known each other about a year, and you know, really impressed with what she's done with her life and blah 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 blah. But she was thinking about getting a boat, and so she asked me what I thought about the kind of boat she wanted. Well, I'm used to running big yachts. I mean, I just came back from Key West. I was down there for 4 months running an 85-footer, $5 million yacht, and then I ran another 90-foot burger up in Vancouver Island and British Columbia, and then 50-foot Magnum sports cruisers down out of Miami. So we're talking, thousands of horsepower, big lengths. But you said you want to get a little boat.
Yeah, just something for fun.
Well, describe it. I mean, it sounded to me like you were describing like a big jet ski, but I still don't quite understand it.
A mini boat.
Mini boat.
Something that with 2 seats.
Would it have an outboard, or would it inboard, or would it have the jet, or would it have propeller? I mean, you must have an image in your mind of what.
There was a wheel on it, and I believe there was a motor on it. I was just skimming through and I saw it, but I want to do a little more research on it before I get something like that, because I don't want to get something and then it can't handle the waves.
Well, you were planning on just sort of like taking on that inland lake where you're at, or some rivers or whatever?
Yeah, the lake. So it probably wouldn't be bad if it's a lake. I probably wouldn't take it on the river though.
How about, well, a lot of people, the big thing is boating safety. So, I mean, would you take a boating safety class, or do you feel as though you have enough experience now that you could handle a little boat like that?
I could. I drove my dad's boat growing up. Mm-hmm.
What kind of boat did he have?
It was a John boat.
And were you there when they would have the compressor and he'd be down and they'd have the line? Wow. So was your job at all to monitor? Usually in a dive operation, it's pretty technical. They have a dive master and they're watching all these gauges and make sure that people aren't getting nitrogen nicosis and all these other things that can go wrong. What was your role on the John boat when he was down below?
My job was to keep a lookout for barges and making sure that there's no barges that would come our way, which we never had to come across. So
they can be extremely dangerous. I had a friend of mine. Where do you hear this story? He was a young Chicago policeman, and him and another friend of his got this idea. They wanted to be more adventurer, and so he took a leave of absence from the Chicago Police Department, and they got this boat that they were going to use as a dive and excursion boat, and they wanted to get it down the Gulf. So they started out in the fall, right when all other boats were getting put away. And they were trying to get down to the Gulf before any freezing and things of that nature. So they were sort of in a hurry. And so you go from the Chicago River to the Illinois, to the Mississippi, down to the Gulf. And there's a ton of barges on the Mississippi and the Illinois River, because that's how they move a lot of their product. And they move slow, but they usually have what's called a pusher behind them. So, you know, and they might have a scoped a telescope thing so they can raise and lower it so they can get under bridges. But their line of visibility sometimes can be really restricted. And the good ones, they'll usually have a guy on the front that has got a radio. He can communicate back with the pilot or the captain. Well, whatever happened, because they were running at night, because they wanted to get down there quickly, and they were taking turns on shift watch. So one guy would be running while the other guy would be resting. And my friend was in off duty, and he went down below to sleep, and he relied on his buddy. And it was at night, and the guy got tired, and he fell asleep. And guess what happened? They got run over by a barge because he didn't see it.
Wow.
And the barge just took the whole boat and everything down, just pushed it under the water. They didn't find my friend's body until the next spring, because then the ice came in and blah, 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 blah. And they couldn't, and it was like such a sad story, because he was young. He had a good job up here, Chicago cop. Just wanted to do something a little bit more adventurous, which young men like to do. And he lost his life.
Wow.
A barge. So, you know, I run tour boats myself, and up here in Chicago, there's a fair amount of barge traffic, not on the main branch, but on the north and the south. They move cement and sand and other supplies for the building. And I'm always very, very concerned and being alert about watching for them, because they're like lumbering old elephants. But if you get in their way, they smash you. Yeah. So, all right, let's see here. Why don't we talk a little bit about that, going back to the Bahamas and the exotic stuff. And I want to sort of tie this in a little bit, because, you know, I think my days of exotic places are over. I mean, I like staying in the coastal waters. I have an inland license and a near shore, which means an ocean going license too, up to 250 miles offshore. And I'm very comfortable with that, you know. I must admit, I did like Canada. I've spent time in the Caribbean, but you know, if we could roll that video about that cruise ship tour meeting, and it's coming up, and you guys can watch it and listen to it.
Our boat is sinking. So that's fun. Everybody's freaking out. Literally sinking. I'm on the top floor of a ferry.
We couldn't hear the sound here in the studio, but I'm sure you folks heard it. It's going, and yelling, screaming, and, you know, I can't believe this is happening. And but that was a major commercial operation in the Bahamas. It was a tour vessel, apparently, that was somehow affiliated with the cruise lines, where they couldn't give people a little bit, you know, more closer tour excursions. And as you can see, the people were terrified. And one of the problems they had too, which they came out later, was the PFDs, PFD stands for personal flotation device. The life preservers were up in the racks above where the passengers were sitting. So they had like grandmas, grandpas, little kids, all this, and people were having a real difficult time reaching to get the PFDs. Now the boat starts sinking. And so they had to rely on like taller people. They could reach up and pass them around. And as you can see, the boat was listed to one side, so everyone's going to the other, trying to counterbalance it. And then people are sliding into the water, and they're yelling and screaming. I love that one woman. It looked like she was floating on her back, and she was going like, I can't believe this is happening. Well, unfortunately, this is what happens when you're in those kind of incidences. You know, they happen very quickly, and they get out of control very quickly. And there were some other boats that came to the rescue. I don't know if you saw it in the video. And that's one thing about boaters and like the law of the sea, that, you know, if you're out there and you see another boater in distress, you can't just go, well, hey, I'm going on my own. Yeah, I mean, you're under a duty to stop and help. And that's what they were doing. And it's quite a video. So, like, you see this uniform I'm wearing, like, that was I showed it to the girls there in the studio before we were playing the show today. And they both started laughing. They're going like, oh my God. And they go, and then they both said that they didn't know how to swim. I go, what? You know how to swim, right?
Yes.
I know how to swim. There's a lot of people out there that don't know how to swim, which means if they don't get that PFD, they're going to drown. And you know who else doesn't know how to swim? The great Captain Mark. He wears that, it's the portal ones that have the CO2 so that they're flat until you hit the water, and then they, like a Mae West.
Yeah.
And I used to teach swimming to kids at Chicago Swim School, and I would highly recommend teach your kids how to swim when they're, you know, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, you know, and because it's an important skill to know. And I had a incident. I was swimming in my pool a couple of weeks ago, and these two guys were in the lane next to me. They were a couple of guys from India, and they were watching me. They go, wow, you have such amazing form. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know why they were standing. They didn't know how to swim. So they asked me, would you show us how to swim? So I started off with teaching them about buoyancy and all that other kind of stuff. But, you know, and I just take it for granted. And thanks, Mom and Dad, for, you know, making me teach them. And I remember it's not really formal. You know, they took you to a pool and, you know, gave you a little rubber thing to float around it until you could sort of get the feel of things, and you just would. How did you learn how to swim?
I learned how to swim on my own.
You did? In a pool? Mm-hmm. Have you ever had a close call with drowning?
No.
Me neither. I've watched other people almost drown. So, and I reckon the girls here in the studio, I told them I give them swimming lessons if they wanted it. So, and even Captain Mark, but I don't think he wants to do it. He's just comfortable with having that CO2, you know what I'm talking about? They're flat. Well, like, as opposed to the ones that are always blowing up, so. Well, it looks like we're getting near the end of the show. Do you have any questions or comments for the audience?
I don't, no.
Well, Wisconsin Tiff, thank you very much for coming to the show. We need more women like you. And signing off from the Wheelhouse, and Captain Mark will be back next week. Adios.